All right. Thank you all for coming. I know this is a fairly small crowd, but I know that Brooke is entertaining, so I know that she's going to be very, very articulate in her speaking and very entertaining, I'm sure. And I'm not quite sure. I don't know Sean very well, but I'm sure that he will do just as well. So thank you all for coming. This is actually our second First Tuesday event of this year yet. We started 2021. Our last first one that we had was March 3rd of 2020, which we had the artificial intelligence or the autonomous day. So that was a great success, but it literally was like a week and a half before everything just went to the C word. So we were very lucky to have that. But thank you all for coming. There may be others that are joining us. We had several more that had signed up, so maybe they're just coming for the happy hour too. So we appreciate you coming. So if you're not familiar with our First Tuesday events, then you'll know that if you are familiar with the First Tuesday events, then you'll know that we, Purdue at Westgate, strive to be that regional connection hub of startups, small businesses, academia, and government. We have been hosting these events as well as others for over 4 years, except for most of 2020. Since then, in wanting to keep up with the momentum of collaborations, collisions, and just social engagements, we started a webinar series. For this year, we have hosted over 30 webinars, anywhere from doing business with the government, topics on concentrated technology such as hypersonics, quantum science, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, etc., to emotional intelligence and the toil of running a startup. We have had in-person audiences that have come from different states to virtual audiences that have attended from other countries and universities. I mention this because of our physical location. We definitely understand the commute that some of you may have had, so we strive to make this as advantageous to you as the audience, as well as to the presenters that are here. Today, we are excited to be in person, first of all, but we are also excited to be hosting this event alongside our presenters and our sponsors from NSTXL and NSWC Crane. Today, they will be speaking on the Strategic and Spectrum Missions Advanced Resilient Trusted System, also known as SMARTS, and the work they are accomplishing with government, industry, and academia to foster collaborative opportunities and enable innovation-driven partnerships. I would like to introduce you to Brooke Pyne and Sean Davis. Brooke is the NSTXL SMARTS Director here within the Westgate at Crane Technology Park. If you haven't read her bio, I suggest you do so. For the sake of time, I will just say that she has a long and successful history with working with DoD, industry, and academia to help create other transaction agreements, OTAs, that will help provide unique opportunities to leverage innovation as it pertains to the warfighter's needs. I would also like to introduce you to Sean Davis. Sean is the program manager for SMARTS within the Global Deterrence and Defense Department. He is responsible for training other government employees on the use of OTAs for prototyping requirements, assisting the requirement holders with drafting statements, and coordinating plans with contracting, legal, and the SMARTS Consortium Manager, NSTXL, as well as many other responsibilities. So we're excited to hear from both of them today. So thank you all for coming, and with no further ado, Brooke and Sean.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So I'll start off by prefacing this with I'm not a contracting officer or an agreements officer. I told a couple of guys that out here a few minutes ago. The first slide that we've got here discusses some of the differences between FAR and OTAs. There's different governing regulations. If you're familiar with government contracting, the FAR is most common federal acquisition regulation. But OTAs are governed by U.S. Code 10 U.S. Code 2371 and 2371B. So 2371 is the research authority, which grants authority for basic, advanced, and applied research projects. 2371B is the prototyping authority. So we have had the prototyping authority since February of 19. We just recently added the research authority. So we've done a large number of projects, work over 30 at this point, totaling a little bit more than 700 million in 2.5 years on the prototyping side. So a lot of work on that side of the house. Like I said, the 2371 research just started up. We have not executed any projects yet on the research side, but plan to this FY. For our primary focus is supplies and services. And again, we're talking research and prototyping when you think of an OTA. OTAs are more flexible when you think about the contract negotiations piece, negotiating your IP, your data rights, things of that nature. A lot more flexibility. Everything within the terms can really be negotiated. It's not real stringent and rigid like you might see in a FAR-based agreement. The audience is slightly different as opposed to registered federal contractors. You're looking at non-traditional defense contractors as well as your traditional defense contractors. And you might have some large companies that don't typically do business with the government that might want to engage on an OTA because of that flexibility. And you don't have some of the red tape, you don't have some of the cost accounting system requirements that you do on a FAR-based contract. So it kind of opens the door up to some of these entities that don't typically want to work with the government or don't have the ability to work with the government. And then competition, there's different regulations there. SECA applies to FAR contracts. Generally, we want competition on FAR contracts unless there's a reason for sole sourcing, right? But the OTA, again, we still want competition. It's to the maximum extent practicable, but just a different regulation, right? We typically always want to see competition. The reason for that is you get an opportunity to see some really unique solutions. In the OTA world, we're looking for, we really go out with a statement of objectives as opposed to a SAL or a statement of work. So we may have an idea of what we want, but we're not going to tell you how to build it. We want industry to give us a unique solution, be innovative, maybe create something that we weren't aware of. Okay, so that's one of the big benefits of the OTA is just having that flexibility to come up with your own solution that you think will fit our need, meet our or solve our problem. So OTAs, just a couple things there. You know, it's not a credit, it's not a grant. There are some differences. It's not FAR-based, and you know, there's just different governing regulations. And again, we have access on the OTA to not just universities or research institutions and not just traditional defense contractors. We can basically get access to everybody. Non-traditional, traditional, small business, research institution, academia, have access to the whole gamut. But kind of already hit on this here, the types of OTA, research and prototype. One thing here at the bottom on this little arrow down here at the bottom. So the 2371B prototyping authority allows for production without recompeting for that production. There are a couple stipulations there, which I think we've got a slide later on, but mainly if you compete the prototype and you decide that and the prototype is successful and you want to move into production, you can do that without having to compete for the production, because you competed it on the prototype side, you can roll right into a production OT or FAR contract. So this touches on the 2371 authority. And again, just kind of a high level, it does allow for the for us to carry out basic, applied, and advanced research projects. So there is a cost share requirement associated with 2371A. It's 50% cost share to the extent practicable. So, and again, that's kind of a little bit loose, right? If there's a reason it doesn't make sense or it's not practicable, you may be able to justify that and still move forward without a 50% cost share. But generally, you need to be able to state that very clearly, and the agreements officer would have to concur with it. So the prototyping requirements, there's a lot of information on this, and it's probably very hard to see over here on the right side, but purpose, prototype, and participation are the three things that we look for. So Purpose, are you enhancing the mission effectiveness of military personnel, platforms, equipment, etc.? Generally at Crane, that is an easy fit, right? So we're working on defense prototypes. Prototype, the definition comes straight out of the OSD Other Transactions Guide, and it's very broad. There's a lot of things in here that you might not think of when you're thinking of a prototype. So if you haven't looked at this, I'd highly recommend looking at it. It's you can find it on Google. It's just the Office of Secretary of Defense, OSD Other Transactions Guide. I think it was November 18th. Is that right? So a lot of things within that definition. Obviously, hardware, software, things that you can see and hold, are things that people generally think about. But you'll see things in here such as preliminary pilot, test, evaluation, demonstration. There's even reverse engineering to address obsolescence. So that's one that a lot of people don't want to think of. Developing a new methodology or a plan of some sort that is unique. So I'm not going to read all of those to you because there's just tons of them there, but take a look at that if you get a chance, if you haven't already. It is very broad. You can fit a lot of things into it that you might not expect. The participation side is the last one. So there's a couple of ways that you can meet this requirement. So there's actually 4 listed here, and you only have to meet one of these, not all 4. The first one says there's at least one non-traditional defense contractor participating to a significant extent, or nonprofit research institution participating to a significant extent in the prototype project. So that just means that someone who is, part of the team is a non-traditional or a nonprofit research institution, and they're contributing something that is key to the success of the project. For example, if maybe there's a company out there that develops a specific type of software that no one else does, or an algorithm or something that no one else can offer you. I would say that would be key to the success of your prototype. If they're packing boxes for you and shipping them, probably not going to fly. But it's really up to the agreements officer. So significant extent is not a dollar amount. It's not a percentage of work. It really is just, are they providing something that is beneficial and key to the success for this prototype to do what you want it to do? The second piece that you can use to qualify would be that all participants in the transaction are small business or non-traditional defense contractors. So very similar, right? Either all of them or at least one of a participant is a non-traditional or a small business. If you can't meet the non-traditional participation requirement, you can do a cost share. And this does come up every once in a while. And one example I'll give is, say you have a big prime defense contractor that is pretty common out there, does a lot of work for the Department of Defense, and they bid on one of these and they want to provide a solution, but they don't want to partner with a non-traditional for whatever reason. Maybe it's because they don't want to share any intellectual property or any data, whatever the case is. They may say, hey, I want to meet the requirement of the cost share. They can do a 1/3 cost share. Might make sense to do that as in a situation where there is a commercial use for the prototype. So maybe they want to invest their own dollars in it so that they can, they'll fund part of it. So that would make sense, right? I think we had someone, I can't remember, but someone didn't want to give up data rights to the level that we had initially asked for in the RFS. So they proposed that they would do a cost share. They would fund part of the development in exchange for lessened data rights on our part. So that's another situation that came up. And can you think of any others?
No, we've actually had several that have come in for criteria number 3 here in the last probably year, right? First, everybody hit 1 or 2. And now that kind of the OTA is becoming more aware, the amount of dollars that are being ran through the vehicle, we're seeing more and more companies come in and use number 3. And a lot of that is dual use, right? So again, it's that commercial military use. They want to be able to take it to market, the data rights. So a lot of them are tied into that dual use kind of capacity.
The last one here is one that we may never use. If you can't meet any of those first 3, you can go to the senior procurement executive for the agency and get written approval. Craig probably doesn't want to do that if we don't need to. Generally, almost every time someone proposes, they have a partner in mind that's a non-traditional, or they're a non-traditional just to begin with. So just to reiterate, this doesn't stop any of your large primes from bidding on these. They can, as long as they're partnering with a non-traditional or doing a cost share. So it is still open for them to compete on these as well. So this slide here, just a note on a non-traditional defense contractor and what that is. And again, it's probably a little different than what most would expect. These 4 bullets here at the bottom are the things to kind of focus on. But the big thing, that last bullet there, if they perform less than $50 million in full cost accounting standards requirements in the previous cost accounting period or previous year, essentially, they are a non-traditional defense contractor by definition. If small business exempt from cash requirements, only perform full firm fixed price contracts with price competition, your large companies that only perform contracts under commercial procedures, don't typically work with the government, they're probably going to be considered your non-traditionals, right? So a lot of companies that think they are traditional fit into these categories. So if you have a small business, for example, that maybe they only do defense contracting, but they perform less than $50 million in cost accounting requirements over the previous year, they qualify as non-traditional. Production, I kind of hit on this earlier. The legislation basically says if the prototype other transaction agreement was awarded competitively, and it was successfully completed, meaning it met the success criteria that you laid out in your RFS, then you can move into a production other transaction agreement without having to recompete for that production end. You have to, in your prototype solicitation and in our request for solutions, we have to state that, hey, we plan to, or there may be, we may plan to move into production if this is successful. You have to state that in the request for solutions. If we don't, then we can't do this. But as long as we do, we competitively award it, it met our success criteria, we can move into that production agreement. And like I said, this can be another transaction agreement, or it can be a FAR agreement without having to further compete it. So, let me take this one.
You can. We're not that big.
All right. So, big thing here with the addition of the research authority, SMARTS does have the ability to do both research and prototyping. So, and I believe we're the only OTA that has both authorities under one umbrella, which is pretty unique. It was pretty neat. I didn't realize that until we started looking at it, but we are the only one that has both authorities that I'm aware of. There's no ceiling on the OTA, so Brian was actually part of the team when we stood this up, and we considered that basically due to some of our customer requirements. We knew there were going to be large projects that were going to be coming to us from OSD. But in exploring some of the other OTAs that were out there, I think we had talked to some other groups, and that was a lesson learned. They had a ceiling, and everyone started coming to them to use their OTA, and they hit their ceiling long before they planned to. So that was something that we considered when we stood this up. made sure that there was no ceiling. 10-year agreement started in February of 2019, and that's with options. We have an option coming up here real soon. So, but yeah, 10 years total with the options included. That's within NSTXL as our consortium manager. So one of the big benefits, smooth transition. So obviously, you know, if there's a research project that we push forward with, having that second step of this, moving into prototyping and ultimately into production, you can basically start a project from very beginning, early development stages, all the way through the end to production, and have one consortium manager, one government team, one agreements officer support it throughout. So you have that continuity, and you know, you have the ability to continue to move that through with the same team from start to finish, which is really nice, I think. And then we have a very collaborative relationship. So Brooke and I talk every day. You know, my role as the program manager is to interact with our consortium manager, with our contracting team, our legal counsel, make sure that everything is in order on every project that we do. You know, we have collaborative events out at the lab just down the road from here. So that way, I guess. But anyways, when a technical team has a requirement, it's really easy for us to go out to the lab, sit down at the conference table, and just kind of hammer out our documents together as a team. That way, we can all help each other with any questions that the tech team has, and they can help us understand the requirements so that when we start moving the project forward, we can explain it to contracting and legal, make sure that everyone's on the same page. And, you know, ultimately, if we can get contracting and legal out there at the same time, it makes things go much quicker. We get everybody in the same room and just knock it out. So that's one of the nice benefits, I think, of our OTA and the team that we have here. Do you want to add anything?
Go ahead to the next slide, then I'll.
Okay. So I'll take this one too, I
Yeah.
think. So keeping pace with technology was one of the big reasons, obviously. So on the global side, we deal with a lot of microelectronics. You know, if you think of some of these big deterrence systems, you've got to have microelectronics that won't fail, for one, you know, stand up over long periods of time in storage and never fail, stand up to radiation environments. So being able to keep up with cutting edge technology, new technology is extremely important. That was one of the big things when we start thinking about the OTA is how do we keep up with technology? How do we move faster so that, you know, what we're using isn't obsolete already, right? So we can get to it quickly. So speed of acquisition, you know, these typically tend to be a lot faster. You know, your FAR contracts, I'm sure you guys, if you've worked in acquisition, tend to take a while, you know, 9, 10, 12 months, or longer in some cases. So this allows us to move a lot quicker. And again, you just have a lot of flexibility to do some things differently as well. But, you know, our timelines, they varied a little bit depending on the complexity of the project. Initially, we were looking at about 90 days from the time we release a solicitation to the time we award. It's been a little bit longer since then. We've had some more complex projects and a lot more projects. So, but we're still able to do things in 4 to 5 months, typically from a solicitation to an award. In some cases faster, it just kind of depends on the project. And then diversification of sources, obviously, that's a big one. So one of the things that we asked NSTXL to do, and actually when we solicited this, all the proposals, we asked them to go out, tell us, you know, hey, what companies do you have that fit in these technology areas within your consortium? And so that's one of the things that we rely on NSTXL for, is to go find companies that work within certain technology areas that can respond or even team up with companies when they respond to a solicitation, so that we get the best solution. We've got a nice pool of companies. They get notified when the solicitation goes out, NSTXL can start talking to them about forming teaming arrangements and things like that. So it helps us get a nice pool of companies that will bid on these efforts, and we actually get a fair amount of responses to about every one of them. So we're pretty happy with that. So this slide touches on the scope, and I'm not going to read these entire things to you. The spectrum, you're looking at electronic warfare, your IR, infrared, RF, radio frequency types of technology systems, airborne electronic attack systems, things of that nature. 5G is another one that's kind of a hot topic right now. So those are things that we're looking at. Strategic missions. We're looking at global deterrence and defense, right? So your nuclear weapons, nuclear deterrence systems, global strike systems, missile defense, things of that nature. And then, like I said, microelectronics is a really big one for us. Brian is actually the task manager on the Trusted and Assured Microelectronics program for OSD. So a lot of the work that we've done so far has come through that particular office. But again, we want to make sure that we have cutting edge technology. We want to make sure it's not counterfeit, make sure it's not tampered with, and stand up to radiation environments, won't fail, those kinds of things. So microelectronics actually play a very important role in these strategic systems. Hypersonics is another big one that's kind of a hot topic right now. Those are, again, global strike capabilities. So those are the types of projects you would see from the global side. And then these are our focus areas. So we knew that we needed companies that specialize in these areas. So when we asked NSTXL to put together a consortium, these are the areas that we wanted to pull companies from. So, a lot of these you'll see kind of focus around microelectronics, but we've got strategic mission hardware, spectrum warfare technologies down there. It's kind of a catch-all for those two departments in that scope. But you'll see things like machine learning, design assurance, materials and processes, things of that nature. But at the end of the day, we want companies that can maybe not necessarily even serve as a prime, but serve as a teammate that can provide some of these functions or some of these technologies to an overall solution. So that's really the goal there with those focus areas. Some key benefits to the OTA. Milestone schedules are one thing that we use. So these are generally firm fixed price agreements, and we may have specific deliverables that we lay out in a request for solutions. Those are typically tied to milestones. The respondent can actually propose various milestones of their own if they wish to. Those could be actual deliverables, they could be reports, they could be designs, they could be technical interchange meetings, whatever the case is, leading up to that final prototype deliverable. Those can be used as opportunities to kind of evaluate where you're at. Are you on pace to be successful? Do you need to reevaluate, change course? You need to terminate. So those are things that those milestones can be used for. One of the great things, though, is that we can actually pay the performer as they complete each milestone. So you're not waiting till the end of the project to get paid. Great thing for a small business, I think. But as you complete each milestone, you can be paid for that. So, and this next point here, the advanced payments. So advanced payments are allowed on OTAs, and this is a really big benefit for the government, but there is a benefit for the performer as well here. So NSTXL can actually bill us 6 months in advance for any milestone that's due on a project. So what that does is allows us to move that money off as expense, right? So NSTXL has it. So we've met our benchmarks for the program. We hope. But NSTXL holds that money in an account, and as that milestone is completed, they can disperse payment to the vendor. So it's a lot quicker than you having to wait on a WAF invoice to be paid. So, theoretically, it would have already been paid to NSTXL, so they'll have that money in an account. You submit your certificate of completion to the government, they sign off on it, NSTXL will pay you. And it's what, 10 days?
Yeah, probably, actually, it's probably less than that, probably 5 to 7 days.
So pretty quick, allows you to get paid much faster than you would, you know, if you're waiting on a WAF invoice that you had submitted. Open communication. This is a really nice thing, and the technical people really like this at Crane. So you can have, you know, regular interaction with the performers. So and you as a performer can interact with the government team on a regular basis. So it's really meant to be very collaborative. You can interact with each other, make sure that everyone's on the same page. As long as you're not changing the scope in these discussions, you can have some open dialogue. Last couple things here. So there is a SMARTS website. It's S2MARTS.org. You can see our consortium members. You can see any past solicitations that we put out there, any past projects. You can see current openings, any coming soons. But great resource if you want to see, you know, what kind of projects we've released in the past, get an idea how you might be able to contribute if there is something in your wheelhouse. And then potential for teaming arrangements, and Brooke may want to hit on this a little bit, but you know, that's one of the great benefits of the consortium. You know, you don't necessarily have to be someone who could provide a full solution. If you can provide something to the project, maybe it's just something partial that you can contribute. You can team with other companies and, you know, together come up with a full solution. That's a great way to come in and propose. In some cases, we do accept partial solutions. So it just kind of depends on what the technical requirement is and if the technical team is open to that. But there are situations where we may ask for partial solutions, and then we may have NSTXL reach back to a couple of companies that had partial solutions, say, hey, you guys together could form a full solution. Would you guys want to team together? So they could kind of help facilitate that. Now, Brooke, I don't know if you want to hit on your INX events.
Yeah, I can. So, so there are several engagements throughout the process flow where we try to help foster teaming. So it kind of gets to the third bullet, I guess, open communication. So hopefully what you're hearing is throughout this entire dialogue is flexibility, right? So non-FAR, that's another big one to hear, right? Non-FAR. Flexibility, open communication, innovation. This is really about attracting and getting to the people that typically are not able to innovate with the federal government. FAR can be very difficult. SBIR can be very difficult. All these other normal kind of areas that get into the government can be hard for these young innovators and these young startups to kind of get through. This is the area where OTA really starts to shine, because it really is about pulling in those type of people. And so again, hitting on open communication. So a couple of things that we do, open communication, flexibility, the teaming is all a part of that US code that makes up the OTA, the non-FAR US code. What we do is we try to create a SMARTS framework or an architecture that actually will help Crane maximize those type of flexibilities within the US code. So some of that is what Sean has hit on here, the open comms and the teaming. So what we do is oftentimes we're always working with Sean, we're working with the government customer. We are helping identify what those problem sets are that will come through that OTA. But in parallel, we're out here working with this innovative community, getting them primed and ready to do business with the federal government so that we have a collision point in the middle, right? I mean, that's kind of how the beauty of all this works. We have the visibility of what's coming through. We're over here trying to build this community, make these partnerships, expose these innovators on these teaming arrangements so that if and when that opens, that opportunity opens, they're primed and ready. So we do that in a few ways. So once an opportunity gets so far in the approval process, so you'll hear us talk about a project acquisition approach document. That's one of the first documents that a Crane customer would create to get something approved to go on the vehicle. We're involved with helping educate and draft part of that once it gets so far in the process. When that is approved by Crane, we put out what is called a coming soon. It is the first sneak peek to all the innovators within the community, within our network, within our greater network. Hey, this RFS, Request for Solutions, is getting ready to open up. Get ready. Start thinking about how you want to team on this. Start thinking about what you bring to the table. Start thinking about your capabilities. So we conduct what we call as an INX, or an Innovator Networks event. What it is, it's a big collection of all these folks that are interested in this opportunity, talking about who they are, what capabilities they bring to the table, what type of role they want to play potentially on this opportunity. So they'll say, hey, we think we want to prime this, but we really need somebody that has this capability to come in with us to get this holistic solution set into the federal government. Or they may say, hey, we don't want to prime. We want to be a sub, but here's what we do and here's what we bring to the table. So we kind of force those type of conversations in that collision point before that RFS opens. And a lot of the reason for doing that is that these RFSs are rapid and quick. And as Sean said, some of them in complexity are huge. Dollar amounts are big. Some others are small. We have it kind of all over the gamut. But if you're going to propose on a $100 million project, you have 30 days to write the proposal. We got to be thinking about some of that up front, right? We got to be thinking about who do we need to bring to the table? Who do we need to team with? So we do all we can within this framework to have these engagement points, these interaction points, and this open communication to prep you for that RFS for when it opens, so you're primed and ready to draft that proposal and be able to pursue the opportunity. I'll take this. Okay, so this kind of gets back to the consortium model. And I know Sean has kind of mentioned this, but a couple of things to think about here. So yes, SMARTS has a scope. You saw the scope. And if anybody that knows NSWC Crane, that aligns to their departments, right? You got Spectrum, you got Strategic. Expeditionaries, they're loosely trying to hopefully get it added down the road. But essentially, it's all about the technology areas, the technology domains that we are supporting on SMARTS. So although NSWC Crane and their customer portfolio are the main users of the SMARTS OTA, other folks within DoD can come in and use the OTA as long as they align to that scope and as long as they align to the 2371 definition of either research or 2371B for that prototyping arena. Then they can come in and potentially use this. We sit in this really unique area. It's actually a really fun area. I actually love it. Really unique area where we are continuing to help the federal government with the projects and the opportunities that are creating through that opportunity and through the SMARTS OTA. But yet we're out here also talking to the small businesses, the innovators, the academic partners, all these folks that are really interested in these technical domain areas, right, that support the DoD and interested in this rapid acquisition model. So we sit in a really unique area where I'm able to play on both sides, which actually aligns very nicely to my background and what I like to do. So we are always interacting with small businesses, nonprofits, other labs, again, other government customers, non-traditionals, but also traditionals. So as Sean said, we have a really great mix within our membership. Our membership, I looked today, it was 864, if I remember right, in our membership that we have within our consortium. Really nice mix between non-traditional smalls as well as traditionals, primes, and academics that really make up that mixture, which becomes very important when we're looking for those teaming arrangements. So very key to have a healthy diversity within that membership that we seem to have and we seem to hold within the NSTXL consortium. Go ahead, Sean. I'll let you take this one.
So we kind of hit on some of these things. Again, you know, we have both authorities available to us. The collaborative process. And again, I'll just hit on the fact that, you know, these guys have a lab just right outside the gate here. So it's really nice to be able to interact with, you know, the entire government team, whether it's technical, contracting, legal, as well as even the performers in some instances. We've had meetings with some of the performers, the awardees out here at the lab. And we actually just had one last week out there at the lab, and it kind of cut through some barriers, I think, in communication, kind of helped get us, you know, headed in the right direction on a particular project where that, you know, dialogue over the phone wasn't really accomplishing what we needed it to. So I think having that access to that space where we can meet and work collaboratively, I think it's really unique, and I think it's been extremely beneficial in moving many of these projects forward. But the ecosystem, commitment, engagement, Brooke just kind of talked about that in a lot of depth. But you know, she mentioned 864 consortium members. So you may want to speak to this too, but so we have a consortium for SMARTS, but NSTXL does manage consortiums for a couple of other OTAs, TREX and SPEC, which is space related. TREX is AI.
Army.
So anyhow, if you join one of their consortiums, you're actually a member to all of them. So it's a little bit different than some of the other consortium managers out there that make you pay a membership fee for each consortium that they manage. You know, if they had 13 consortiums and you wanted to join them all, you pay 13 consortium management fees. Where with NSTXL, you join one, you get access to all. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but
We do. So that was actually for me, that was one of the big philosophy days when I left the lab to actually come out and do this role, was that cross-pollination. So all of our OTAs that we have really do have technology areas that cross-pollinate. We would be doing the federal government a complete injustice if we shut the consortiums down and then we had to figure out how to partner and get people to pay 3 times to become a member. We cross-pollinate between our OTAs all the time. So all of the directors talk all the time about companies. We ping companies back and forth between each other. If I happen to talk to a company that's doing AI or machine learning, yes, I have AI and machine learning in my scope, but right now it's not a big feeder in my pipeline. Hypersonics, 5G, microelectronics, those are all of our big feeders, again, line to crane. But yet TREX out of ACC Orlando, that's like one of their biggest investment lines coming into their OTA. So I'm constantly feeding companies into that OTA and vice versa. And for space, it's no different, right? Hypersonics and what they need in space is a direct alignment. So that cross-pollination really becomes key. And to be honest with you, the innovators within the community love that, because they could talk to people that may be doing business over here in the space arena that haven't done anything with the Navy or Army, but yet now they're talking to people and they're cross-pollinating, and then they're going after and pursuing other opportunities that aren't just on the OTA, which is fantastic. So that cross-pollination is really key for us and a big part of our foundation to our consortium. How do you want me to take it? So this is a little different as well. So a lot of times when you're looking at the OTAs and looking at various consortium managers, they start out with a white paper approach, and then they get in literally hundreds of white papers that then get dispersed into the federal government that are evaluated. And then they'll go back and determine whether or not there's something they want to pull a thread on and get a full proposal. Our documentation process up front, that PAA document that I mentioned a while ago, that morphs into that RFS, takes this away. What SMARTS is about focus and intent. So we want to give our customer the exact solution to the problem that they have. So we spend a lot of time up front, probably more time than most other OTAs, on predefining what goes into that RFS so that government customer is getting exactly what they need. So it's almost like we customize to each customer we have for every opportunity that we have. So we jump straight into proposals whenever we put an RFS out, which actually gets the project started much quicker, gets the customer exactly what they need much quicker. And again, as I mentioned a while ago, open communication. There's various points within this structure right here where we have proposals out on, or when we have an RFS out on the street. We actually do what is called a project talks, which is a open environment with that sponsor that's actually funding that opportunity for folks within that innovative network to come in and ask questions about that RFS. So you can talk directly with that sponsor. It helps define those proposals. What we found is we're really striving for quality proposals. We want to get our government customer quality solutions that then they can evaluate and move on with. I would rather get 25 quality submissions or proposals than 50 and half of them were bad, and then it takes all those resources. So we spend a lot of time in this focused and intentional arena and use the open communication model to achieve that.
So yeah, I would say one of the big reasons for that is time, right? So if you go out for white papers and you evaluate those, and then you release a request for solutions and you get proposals in and you evaluate those, you're adding time. Typically, we try to nail down with the technical requirement holder what it is they're trying to accomplish. What is the problem you're trying to solve? If they have specific, and then we have an idea of what this prototype might be, right? It might be some type of a system, or it might be some type of software, or whatever the case is. For manufacturing process, we've had some of those.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, they might have some parameters that this prototype needs to operate within, or certain criteria that it needs to meet. And it's up to you guys to tell us how you're going to meet those, but not necessarily how you're going to do it. We want you guys to be innovative and tell us how you're going to develop a prototype to meet those. Do you want to say something, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm just going to add two things to this. Is from your perspective and my perspective, from a project management perspective, is they don't go out with anything unless there's money tied to it, right? You guys can go online and see white paper requests all the time. You spend weeks to do this white paper response, knowing that there may never be any funding tied to it. If something comes out on SMARTS, there's a program office behind it, there is money behind it. So anything you submit, someone is getting selected for this project. And then the other thing is, we don't request a 200-page C4 proposal from you guys. We tell you we want 25 pages. I don't want your sales pitch. I don't want your elevator speech. I want 20 pages of technical responses. So you guys aren't spending all this time getting a 200-page response. It's 20 pages. Tell me how you're going to solve it. Very detailed in 20 pages and be done. And that helps our evaluation, right? Because like Brooke said, if we get 15 proposals that are 200 pages long, it's going to take us a long time to go through that. When 100 pages of it is just garbage, all this stuff. So get to the meat, and that's all we're going to evaluate.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
And Brian's right. I mean, there's always funding behind these now. Is there a random situation where budget might get cut? Yeah, it's happened a couple of times, not much. I think we've had maybe a few.
Yeah, maybe 2 or 3 out of 36 or 37 releases. that
But
we've
very
had.
unlikely. I mean, generally that budget's been put forth and then there's an actual plan to execute it. So anytime that we put out a request for solutions, there is a plan to fund that. The submitter follow-ups are really nice. So whenever we take in proposals and we evaluate them, we try to wrap those up pretty quickly. So Ryan mentioned 20, 25 pages. It's up to the technical team. If they think it only takes 10 pages, they can say, I want a 10-page proposal. So it really just kind of depends, but complexity plays into that, right? But we try to have the evaluation teams wrap those up pretty quickly. Most of the time, within a couple of weeks, they've wrapped them up. We've had some wrap them up within a couple of days. It's just a different process than what they go through on the FAR side. But in this world, they can evaluate and rank the performers against each other. They can identify the strengths and weaknesses and compare against each other. I mean, there's a lot of flexibility when it comes to this evaluation, where you're not just necessarily evaluating technical proposal without price information or selecting the lowest cost option as long as it meets the requirement. That's not the case here. There's a lot of flexibility to make a business decision here like you would in the commercial environment. But these follow-ups, so evaluation's done, they've reached a consensus, but say they had some questions on some of the proposals, we can actually follow up with you and set up a phone call, and NSTXL, we generally facilitate that. We'll have contracting on just for their awareness, but if there's clarifying questions that they need to ask about your proposal, that's an opportunity for them to do that. It might help get a little bit of clarity for that technical team, and it might help you. You know, if maybe there's some information that wasn't real clear in your proposal, but it came out during that discussion, and it kind of helps your proposal, they can update their evaluation based on that conversation. Of course, you can go the other way too, but you know, the idea is to be able to gather more information and get a little bit of clarity. So those are a nice thing that we are allowed to do and able to do, and we always do on OTA projects.
Yeah, I can talk to this one, and I'm not going to go into depth and detail here, but essentially it's kind of this middle road where NSTXL kind of lies. But the biggest thing for me to say about this process flow is it truly is collaborative. I know Sean mentioned it several times to where we do sit at the table with Crane government or whoever that government customer is, working all of this process flow and trying to make sure we're getting it into a clear articulation for external innovators to truly understand what the problem set is and what they're seeking solutions on. This is why the process works. This is why we can keep the timeframes down to from RFS release to award anywhere from 90 to 100 days, and that would include your 30-day window of it being on the street. Very different than FAR-based. But if we didn't have this collaborative process that has been predefined within the framework with NSWC Crane, with Sean's team, this process probably wouldn't be as smooth as it is. And for one, I commend Crane for coming forward with, you know, when they were seeking an OTA and really understanding they wanted this collaboration to be a huge, huge part of it. And, you know, this is one reason why it works. And when I say collaboration, it's not just Sean and his team. When Sean talks to me more than he probably wants to. But I mean, it is truly contracting. It is truly legal. It is the sponsors. It is the tech team. We're on the phone with that entire team many times throughout this process to ensure we're getting it right. And again, it's about that focus and intent. If we don't get it right and we don't put the RFS out right, then we're gonna miss the mark. And that is not what we want to do. And the collaboration is a huge, huge part of that. So I can talk a little bit to this one. So again, we've kind of already mentioned 800 plus members strong. I looked today, it is like 864. T-Rex, SPEC, and SMARTS are the three OTAs that NSTXL manages. And again, the consortium is at that higher level. We cross-pollinate among those all the time. We cross-pollinate among those even with our government customers. But again, what this does is it allows us to be very focused and intentional with our outreach. So again, we kind of have our scope, kind of know where the growth is at. So we certainly focus pulling in innovators to this government-ready community, very intentional. Again, we're driving to the government customers that we're talking to. And it's really about getting this government-ready community. How do we get these innovators ready to do business with the federal government through the OTA structure? So we even have training, you know, we have CMMC training, we have proposal training, we have all kinds of different things that we do with our members. But one thing to always remember, you do not have to be a member to see any of our opportunities. So that's another big thing, philosophy thing that is very different than most consortium managers. A lot of times you have to be a member to even see what the opportunities are. For us, you have to be a member at proposal time. So anybody can go out and read every document that's out there for every opportunity that we have, and you can make a business decision on which ones you want to pursue or which ones you don't want to pursue. And that's on all of our OTAs. So that is a big difference also within our consortium management. Our lab, just down the road, as Sean mentioned, very open, collaborative environment. It was one of the things that Crane wanted out of the OTA, and it's used a lot. It's used by our members, it's used by the federal government. It kind of becomes that neutral place. Plus, sometimes it's hard to get on base with visitors, right? So they could easily kind of meet with performers out here. So it really has become the hub and the central location for all things SMARTS.
So You can see here, we've released 36 projects so far, 28 have been awarded, some of them to multiple performers. Got one pending eval, one coming soon, and we've had a couple that leave. But there's a couple that have been canceled.
Yeah.
But you know, been really successful in these first couple of years. So we started in February of 2019. I think we awarded around 52 million in our first year. And this last year, FY21, we awarded a little over 350 million. So you know, some of those are phased efforts that have, you know, additional funding that have been added in those later phases, but a lot of new projects as well. So been really successful, and it continues to grow. We continue to have more groups at Crane show interest in it and want to utilize it as they become more familiar with it. That's one of the things I'm responsible for, is making sure that people at Crane are aware of it, understand what it can be used for, what the process is, and how to utilize it. So we continue to see that growth, and it's been really fast, faster than I think we can keep up with sometimes, but it's been good. Get a lot of repeat customers, and sponsors really enjoy being able to have access to it and move quickly. So.
And I think contracting said 21, they I think 20%, a little over 20% of the obligated funds off in SWC Crane went through this vehicle.
Yes, that is correct. Big numbers. And last slide just has our teams. So Brooke, Tony over here is her deputy. Jalen is not here today, but great guy on the team. He's the collaboration coordinator, sets up a lot of the events, marketing materials, things of that nature. Very helpful. And you've got myself, Anna Gates, and Eric Hendricks are part of my program management team on the government side, help me out with many of the day-to-day duties on the OTA. Did you want to add?
No, the only thing I would add is follow us on LinkedIn. Every opportunity that we have gets posted on LinkedIn. Every event that we have around an opportunity gets posted on LinkedIn. We're on Twitter as well, but LinkedIn has the bulk of our comms. The other thing is, if you are not in our greater network distribution, our greater network distribution is everyone beyond members that wants to be aware. That is about 5,000 strong. If you're not in that, let me know and we will get you added. And then everything will just show up at your inbox. And then again, even not being a member, you can read all the RFSs, you can read all the documentation and make a choice if and when you're ready to pursue. That's it. Any questions?
Is there a percentage that you see get through to a production vehicle?
Probably don't have a real good answer for you on that, because a lot of the projects that we stood up in the very first year were phased efforts. So we've not gotten to that point yet. But I would anticipate that a fair number of them will move into production. It's hard for me to give you a solid number. At this point. Yeah. Most of the projects that we do are multi-year projects, and being only 2.5 years old, we just haven't reached that point yet.
I mean, I think out of all the projects, we only have one that's technically complete. Prototype phase. All other 25 projects, or even back to the ones that we first awarded in 2019, are still in that prototype phase. So I would say from the OSD projects, the 7 or 8 we have, I would say 6 of them are probably going to go into some sort of production when they're complete, but they're all 18 to 36 month prototype projects. So they're long prototype projects.
Which department are you seeing releasing most of these?
Dollars, it would be global. Probably fewer projects. Spectrum made a big jump in the number of projects this last year. So they're smaller efforts, but as far as number of projects, they have recently had more. But you look at dollar value, global has been the bulk of it. Any questions?
In terms of the number of members that you have, I think at 44, I think it's recall. Is it more about getting more members? Is it more quality of members you got at this point?
So it's not always about members, right? Because for me, it's really about that greater network. How many people are we reaching? So that 5,000 number that I can tell the federal government, you give me an opportunity, that's how many we're reaching, is really key. Then it becomes, how do we give them a quality solution, right? To make sure we have the right team together. So it's really kind of twofold for us when we look at it. But it really is about the broadness of the outreach, right? Which is the beauty of, you don't have to be a member to see everything.
Yeah, I think, just from the outside looking in, them adding these space consortium, on the global side, if you're looking at some of these nuclear deterrent systems and hypersonics weapon systems, these things exit the atmosphere, right, and come back in. They've got to be able to stand up to space radiation. So there might be an opportunity for some of those companies to help us out in some situations, depending on what the project is down the road. So, obviously, we have a lot of companies in there that can provide, solid solutions. Obviously, we want quality, and I think that's, one of the nice things about the evaluation process is we can really kind of hammer home what it is that we want. And, the tech team can look at the teaming arrangements that were formed in those proposals, who those companies are, and if they may have some familiarity with them. But at the end of the day, they're going to look at what is that technical solution and how does it best fit our need? How does it stack up against the competition? And they can make a decision based on what they feel is the best value decision. Whether it costs more or less doesn't matter necessarily. They have the budget to fund it.
We've even had a couple opportunities that we put out, federal government has got received proposals in, and those companies, they had no awareness of them. We've got a couple of awardees. There was companies the government had no idea were out there working in their area. So that's a great success story.
The 864, does that include all companies that like?
Yeah, so the consortium is at NSTXL level. It's not per OTA, so all the consortium is in one.
And then the same thing for the money awarded?
No, that's
No,
ours.
that's
SMARTS only.
Okay,
That's
Yep.
SMARTS OTA only.
which kind of negates, my next question was going to be of the 864, how many of those have actually received funding successfully? But you probably would know about the other.
I don't know yet. Yeah, I don't know their numbers off the top of my head, but the 719 is strictly on SMARTS OTA in a little under 2.5, or about 2.5 years, roughly. But the consortium number is at umbrella level. I think so.
So we've had several projects that have had multiple awardees. SHIP initially had 6.
I was gonna say, at the 25 projects or whatever it was, I'd say there's probably 40
Yeah, there may be.
companies. Well, and that's
Maybe
just
more.
the quote unquote major performer, On our rant project, if you guys get on the website and are get familiar with rant, we just moved into phase 2 with Microsoft for almost 100 million for phase 2, and they have like 12 partners on their team. They've got Cadence, Synopsys, they have all 3 major EDA vendors. They got them to play together, which is almost unheard of. They were able to get all EDA vendors in the same room and play together. They got BAE and Raytheon on their team, so they've got good partners, and it's a huge team. That took, we awarded phase 2 to NSTXL like 2 months ago, and it took Microsoft 6 weeks to get everything in line with your BAEs and your Raytheons and everything. So it's not only is it not just a major performer you guys have to keep in mind, but it's those other performers.
Yeah, it's pretty common to see teaming arrangements. So even though we may award to a specific company, it might be a team of 3, 4, or more companies that includes small business or even universities in some cases.
You have to be a member if you want to pitch for a solicitation.
I'm sorry.
You have to be a member if you want to pitch to be awarded.
Yes.
At proposal time.
Yes. So
So why would you want to charge actually these small businesses
He's pointing at Joe, but Indiana University, we're gonna charge you.
But, you know, so the question is, you know, why us? You know, actually, I think we should encourage us to participate. And then the other question related to that is, how does it work then with universities? Is this like a division-based type of participation fee? Because we are totally split up into schools and all kinds.
So are you Purdue?
No, I'm unfortunately IU, but I run a small business.
Oh, that's right, I already liked it. So small business fee small business fee to come in at proposal time is $250.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so it's very, very small. Universities are a little bit higher because, you know, we like to charge you guys a little more. One thing to note that I don't think we mentioned, for 2371, for research, membership is free. There's no membership fee if there's an opportunity that's coming in through 2371, which is going to have a lot of academics in it, right? For 2371B, if we're proposing on an opportunity for that specific statute, that's when that fee would then be paid. But here's the other thing. It comes in as one university fee. It's not split by school.
You know, but our fearless leaders have.
You guys are members. Yes, you are. You are.
That comes into play with big companies too, right?
It does,
Because
it does.
some big companies like Intel or Qualcomm have subsidiaries and they're included.
Yes.
And I think, you know, Brooke can tell you guys more, but there are benefits to membership.
Yeah.
Because they do have events and industry days that are only open to members. So,
Yeah.
you know, if it only costs you $250 to be a member for a year, you not only get smarts, but you get spec and T-Rex opportunities. You get benefits that only members get.
Yeah.
So,
So the biggest thing we run into with big companies and universities is usually someone within their hierarchy is paying the fee, and the people down in the schools that are doing the research don't get on the email distribution, even understand they're a member to understand the opportunity. So that's something we're constantly working with. And there's an unlimited amount of emails that someone can add to that distribution, as long as we know and they come in the door and say, hey, I work at this school. And we're like, yeah, you're a member, we'll add you. So the distribution becomes one of our biggest issues whenever we're talking with a bigger entity.
or even universities where that person's left the university.
Yeah.
They were the only one that got notifications and they don't have a clue.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Brooke and John, for coming here today. Thank you all for coming in person today. We've actually gone a little bit over, but there was great questions. I've learned a lot about OTA. I actually have some ideas on how we can support NSTXL. So thank you all for coming. If you want to go on westgateacademy.com, you can see some of the other things that we're doing. We're still doing some in-person events. We're doing webinars. We're doing quarterly events. We're doing tech park engagement events. So we hope to see you all again soon, but let's go out on the second floor balcony.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
What's it up to?